My buddies and I took our annual motorcycle trip to the New Mexico high country last month. And on one of the days we were there, I dragged the guys out on a ride that provided me with a new and confounding revelation about myself. The older I get, the more I can feel myself turning into a sentimental sap. The foreword to all of this is a little bit involved, so bear with me. You see, for a long time, I would not allow myself the luxury of overindulging in nostalgia from my past. Whether reliving my successes or lamenting my failures, I more or less looked at nostalgia as a weakness, unless I was invoking it for some historical or anecdotal usage or conversation. My philosophy was always that we should be looking ever forward, moving toward the next goal, the next experience. If you are constantly miring yourself in the past, I reasoned, then you are holding yourself back and stagnating. Once you reach middle age, you'll invariably notice this behavior with certain members of your own generation. For example, some of them will still listen almost exclusively to the music that was popular in high school. They'll watch the movies of the time over and over. It's Sweet Child of Mine on Spotify or The Breakfast Club and Ferris Bueller's Day Off looping on Netflix. Well, at least with my generation. Your mileage may vary, but the point is that for some of them, it's not entirely healthy. It's simply an escape from the present because they are dissatisfied with it to some degree, with how things turned out. They want to go back to that one period in time long ago when they can actually remember being happy, before divorces, child support, professional disappointment, social upheaval, cynicism, health problems. I mean, you get the idea. Life wants nothing more than to kick your ass hard. Now, sure, some people get their asses kicked and legitimately can't help it. But a lot of people just let it happen while making decisions along the way to bring it on faster. Then all they can talk about is old times and the good old days and when life was simple. Maybe I'm just a dick when it comes to this kind of stuff, and there's a good chance of that, but their whole attitude is a drag, and it has always pissed me off. Of course life is hard. Of course life sucks. Get in there and embrace the suck. Stare it in the face. Find a way to make it good. I still pretty much believe that, but the problem is I've been very nostalgic myself lately. Yeah, and I can't seem to shake it. Perhaps it's because I'm at a point in my mid-50s now where, although I'm healthy and generally happy, I'm beginning to fully understand the finite nature of life. I likely have more years behind me than ahead of me at this point, and there are certain things from the past that call to me strongly these days. At certain times it can be music or other pop culture. Sure, I'm occasionally guilty of it too. But it's more often for me moments and places that meant the world to me at the time. One of those places is the little cabin in Ruidoso, New Mexico, where my wife and I stayed on our honeymoon 30 years ago. I wanted to go see it while on this ride because I was afraid it may have been destroyed. A few months before this motorcycle trip, Ruidoso, New Mexico had been both conflagrated and inundated disastrously. A wildfire had swept through the area, destroying hundreds of millions of dollars in property. Then, a few days later, a biblical amount of rain followed those fires, washing away homes, roads, bridges, you name it. One of the areas reported to have been affected by both the fires and the floods was the canyon where the cabin was situated. There were many reports of entire neighborhoods having been wiped out, and I just needed to see if the place was still there. We got married in June of '94, both of us in our early 20s, and didn't have a lot of money for a honeymoon. I was working in a recording studio at night as an engineer and session guitarist while doing computer graphics for a reproduction company during the day. In case you're wondering, doing art and music for a living is a great way to need two jobs. But I managed to scrape together enough money for us to rent this little cabin for a week and enjoy the mountains, so that's exactly what we did. It was a beautiful little honeymoon, and it has been a beautiful marriage. I guess that's why the cabin is such a sentimental place to me. Once we had made the ride from Cloudcroft to Ruidoso along the reservation road, we spent some time riding north of the village and then spent some time in the middle of town. What surprised me was how spotty the damage seemed to be. There was a lot of damage, but it was interspersed within areas that had no damage at all. It was almost like the fires in particular jumped across things to other things and left a bunch of stuff untouched. In fact, the downtown tourist area itself looked much better than we'd been told. Most of the businesses were open, so we found a local brewery that served food and we just hung out for a while. Aside from the fire damage and the overflowing creeks, one of the most noticeable indicators that there had been upheaval in the forest was the fact that large wildlife such as elk were wandering through the middle of town. You usually don't see sights like this in the New Mexico high country, but the animals had clearly been pushed out of their normal habitat. We saw it in and around both Ruidoso and Cloudcroft. The canyon road leading to the cabin was a bit of a mess, and every so often you'd see the ruins of a burned out property. But as we made our way to our destination, I was very happy to see my little honeymoon cabin unscathed. The best part was that it looked exactly the same way it did 30 years ago, and was still for rent to the general public. I've resolved that once things get fully back to normal in the area, I'm taking my wife for a long weekend there. The ride back to Cloudcroft was not uneventful. A couple of miles onto the reservation road, we got hailed on. Thankfully, it was only pea and dime sized, only lasting several minutes, but it definitely got our attention. The thing is, there's no shelter and no shoulder anywhere on the reservation road, so we essentially had no choice but to just keep going and push through the storm at low speed. By the time we got back to Cloudcroft, the sky was mostly clear and the air was perfect. We spent the next couple of days doing most of the same rides and activities we usually do on this trip, so I won't show all of it again for the upteenth time, but it was a blast. I'm looking forward to doing it all again next August, as usual, and to making a stay at that cabin in the meantime. If the relief of seeing the cabin provided me anything, perhaps it was maybe a tiny bit more appreciation for nostalgia. I still don't think it should be used as a crutch, but it definitely has been having a positive emotional effect on me at certain times during this particular chapter of my life. And it certainly helped me to empathize a bit more regarding its healing powers, especially on those whose life circumstances have not been as fortunate as mine. Anyway, until next time, keep moving forward and go ahead and look back a little bit, but just enough and not more. Cheers.